You look a hell of a lot better than I do without any makeup on. So, all right, I think we're back live on Facebook. We're gonna give it another shot. Facebook is being squirrely again, you guys. I think every Friday afternoon they whomp us with the sort of squirrely stick. But anyway, I'm here with Pam Houston, and we were just talking about the fact that despite the fact that she writes in this very wild space, like literally wilderness space and love for the land, she grew up in Jersey like me. So we are comparing notes behind the scenes about our rites of passage. So Pam, take that away if you would.
Sure. Yeah. So as I said, I grew up in Trenton. I went, all my significant rites of passage happened at the Jersey Shore, as they should. I mean, where else is better? And I started making my way west a little bit. I went to college in Ohio, and then I went to grad school in Utah. And when I came out here was when, I guess you would say, found my writer's voice. I had been writing. I was an only child. I wrote as a little girl. I wrote to stay sane in my crazy, crazy household. But it was really when I got out here to this landscape and fell in love with it that the metaphor made sense to me, because the land was helping me and healing me and teaching me and schooling me. And there was just so many nouns. There's so many beautiful nouns in the West. And I wanted to describe them. I wanted to describe the places I saw. And I confused, as any young woman would, the men for the land, and, thought that loving, that I could make the land love me back if I could make the men love me back. And of course, they were all stoic Western cowboys. And so that didn't work. And then over a long time, I understood I could have my own relationship with the land. As I say in Deep Creek, I could be the cowboy. I didn't need the cowboy. I could be the cowboy.
I think you have a cowboy now who came to you after the land, right? You do. But I mean,
it was years, but very recently, yes, he's actually a forest ranger. I got married to a forest ranger a couple of years ago. He knows everything about trees, everything.
Oh, I can see how this would be an aphrodisiac kind of thing. I like people who have knowledge. I like men who have knowledge about things. I like people who have knowledge about things, especially things I love, and especially things I don't know anything about. Like, I'm in Minnesota right now, and when somebody can talk to me about farm machinery and explain, like, what is that thing? I get really excited about that. So I get. Do you feel, I have so many questions about what you just said. Do you feel like you were a Western person, spiritually trapped in a New Jersey person's home originally? And like, what is it about the West that spoke to you so much?
I was certainly meant to live here. I feel better here. I love to travel, and I used to love to travel. And I came back, every time I would come back to Colorado, I would get off the plane, even in the Denver airport, which is not beautiful. And I would just, like, my whole body would relax. There's something about the quality of the air here. There's something about the altitude. I think, honestly, probably I was a Tibetan monk in another life. I really do think that, because when I got to Tibet, I thought, oh, I'm home. And of course, anyone would say to you, well, that's because the Himalayas are the most like the high Rockies where you live. And so of course you felt like you were home, but it felt like more than that. So I just wonder if I'm not a high altitude person over several lives, but in any case, I would not, like, I'm not who I am if I didn't grow up in New Jersey, So as much as I love it here, and as much as this is my place and this is where I'm meant to be, or at least I have been meant to be for the last 30 years. And that may change now, but my Jerseyness is a big part of my writer's voice. My Jerseyness is as important to me as a writer and a storyteller and as coming out to the landscape and discovering it and having it open me up. Like, those two things are equally in there, even though I don't much sound like a person from New Jersey anymore, unless I say water.
Girlfriend. We were talking about this off camera. I'm like, yo, girlfriend, your
Macadam.
bonjour.
I was amazed that the word macadam was on Wordscapes the other day. From New Jersey.
Like, yo, I see this. I'm so interested in, as a writer, also from New Jersey. I never stopped to think about how Jersey has shaped my voice, but I'm a person who has one foot in the Midwest, where my mom is from, and one foot in New York, where my dad was from. Like, he never left the state to live anywhere else. And they're two such different cultures, and yet they both exert such strong influences in the way I think about things, in the way I perceive things, the stories I tell myself about other people. So I'm really interested, like, what about your writing? Because I never would have thought this as a writer from Jersey, who also like loves the Midwest and the West. What are the Jersey influences? This is like an entirely unanticipated direction for this conversation, but I'm digging it.
Well, my narrators are tenacious, in a way that, Westerners are stoic, and I am not stoic. I'm angry, and I'm feisty, and I can be really like cutting and sarcastic, which they don't even get. like they just think I'm mean, like they don't get Jersey humor. And I've really had to, like, now when I turn in a book, I do what I call a compassion read. And I just look at all the cheap shots I've taken, the cheap New Jersey shots I've taken, because that's how my mind works, but I'm trying to be, more compassionate, and I'm trying to be kinder. I'm trying to be a kinder person than I was raised to be. But my humor is very New Jersey. My critical eye is very New Jersey. Also, there's something about like Jersey storytellers. I mean, I think that's why I went to the second person early in my career. You're sitting there and this guy walks up to you and he says, it's like the second person is the language of the Vinnies, and I have that language very much inside me, even though, my subject matter is the West, and I am trying to be kinder than I was raised to be. But a lot of that New Jersey humor, in my opinion, is still really funny, but it doesn't play well out here. You
find that in the Midwest also, and the speed with which I talk. I think people just think I'm on crack or something, and I'm like, no, I'm from the East. This is the way we talk. But I'm glad to know that, like, this sort of the vinegariness sometimes of my humor is Jersey. I thought it was just me being a mean girl, but now I can just blame it on the state, and like watching too much Richard Bay growing up and being like, you're getting in my face. Like, but I do think that's true culturally. Like my friend Jim, who I'm living with right now, my COVID buddy, he has always said, like, you would never put up with any of my bull bleep because of your Jersey. Like, I needed your Jersey in my life to push back against. And I think that's my idea too, is that like, that sort of feistiness, or like not accepting things as they are, like not working with the land and like working with and shaping it, right? But just saying like, no, I am not having this. I'm going to like push back against it. I think of that as a sort of an Eastern dissatisfaction in a way.
And also like not prettying things up to make everybody comfortable, like there's this desire for like a happy ending, or a kind of politeness, a level of politeness that just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, we're writers, we're not supposed to be polite. We're supposed to tell the truth as much as we can access it. And I think that's very New Jersey, like this, like, no bullshit, no bull bleep.
Yeah, I say, yeah. And whenever I swear, I'm like, it's my Jersey, I can't help it. But if you talk to me for more than 30 minutes, you're going to get some F-bombs in there. Readers take me to task for this on Amazon. I'm like, Jersey, I can't help it. Yeah. What are you going to do, Paulie? Actually, I dated a guy named Paulie.
I think I love the West like someone who grew up in New Jersey. I don't think I love the West in the same way that seventh generation ranch daughters love the West. I love it like I'm still amazed by it, like it's not where I grew up. It wows me constantly still, even now that we've hammered it half to death. Like I'm in awe of it, like a visitor. you know, though I have now lived here more than 30 years.
Do you still walk outside? And can you describe for readers what your view looks like? And again, you guys, if you haven't, you should follow Pam on social media, because you will see the incredible beauty of the place she lives in. Also, there are sometimes photos of baby sheep and goats and her dogs and creeks and mountains. And when you walk, go like every day, pretty much.
I do find a way. I mean, I live at 9,000 feet, and the mountains around me rise to 12,000 feet. I'm looking at them, you know, right now out the windows. And so there's always somewhere to walk that I haven't walked before. You know, I live next to, I want to say 400,000 acres, or maybe it's, I'm never good with zeros, but I live next to 4 national forests, and a lot of it is designated wilderness. You could literally get lost in it, you know, permanently. It's that big. And so, you know, the stars and, you know, the clarity of the water in the little lakes and the colors of the wildflowers, which we're just getting into now. I mean, we're in drought, but we've gotten just enough rain that we're getting some flowers. And I mean, yeah, I mean, I walk 5 miles a day, minimum. I have, speaking of like, I have my Fitbit, and so yeah, I walk, like we've been walking this week on a mountain called Baldy, which is just, just a few miles from here. And it was clear cut in the, I don't know, 50s or sometime. So it has these weird little roads cut into it that are just like this when they, like, it wasn't clear cut, it was selectively clear cut. So it has all these weird little roads in it. And you can, like, we've gotten to know that mountain in the last, 10 days, because, and I've never even been over there. I've lived here for 30 years. I've never walked on any of these roads, but they're grown over, but you can still see them. So you can make your way. You're not going to come along and all of a sudden there's going to be a cliff or so dense you can't go through. And just like discovering that mountain, which is literally out my bedroom window, but discovering it on that sort of macro level, just because we're here forever, like we're here every day. So there's a million different places to walk. It's been like there's these little tiny hidden waterfalls and these places where the dogs can drink. And you would never know that from just looking out the window at it. It's all these little hidden corners of just one single mountain, and I live around 400 mountains like that,
Oh, again, so many questions. This is a Jersey girl question from somebody who idolized like the middle of the country and the mountains. But my adventures are all in storm chasing. So I'm used to this flat land where you can see all the dangers coming at you. Like you can see locusts, prairie fire, tornadoes, whatever, cavalry. But I don't know anything about mountains. And so when I was reading your books, especially Cowboys Are My Weakness and Waltzing the Cat, I was thinking, do you ever get scared where you are? Like when you set out to explore a mountain, what kind of precautions do you take to ensure that you don't get lost? Or do you have such a highly developed instinct now for the natural world that you can kind of tell where you are?
I have a really good sense of direction. And I mean, I am afraid of some things, but not actually getting lost. I've really never been lost in the mountains. There's been an hour when I wasn't sure where I was, but it has always worked out rather quickly. And that's partly because, it's partly because I'm hypervigilant, but it's also because I was a guide, I was a sheep hunting guide in Alaska, and we were always following the sheep. These are wild sheep, just FYI for those. And so the bighorn sheep. So we were following doll sheep, technically. We were following the sheep. So we had to follow them wherever they went. And if that was over the glacier and down the other side into a canyon we'd never been in before, that was just what it was. So in those years, I got very, very good at like watching markers on like skyline markers, like, oh, this one rock looks like a sombrero, or this rock, that looks like an eagle, so that I could find my way back. So that's just a skill set I have from my guiding days, so I really don't get lost.
God.
The thing I'm most afraid of are men with guns, and so in that way, it's not so different than living in a city. I'm not really afraid of wild animals. A lot of times when I'm hiking, I'll hear shots and it's not hunting season, and like, why are they shooting? I don't know. They love to shoot, so that's really my only true fear in the mountains. Like sometimes I'll be out and I'll get caught after dark, or I'll get caught in certain kinds of weather. Sometimes lightning, there's a lot of hiking above tree line here, and that can be very, people die every year. Some years lightning strike is the leading cause of death in this county. So I have run from lightning, but I'm not exactly afraid of wild animals. We don't have grizzlies here. Well, that's arguable, but if we have them, we never see them. And so I'm really not afraid of any other animals.
Do you have rattlesnakes?
Nope, too high.
That's good. Oh, good. All right. Okay, then I feel better. No grizzlies, no snakes. But the gun thing is scary because I think. Do you think are people hunting out of season, or are they just like, I just feel like shooting off some guns for no reason? That's actually not something I enjoy doing, so I can't understand why you might like to do that. But like target practice, I don't know.
It could be poaching, which would be bad. If I stumbled upon it, it could be just shooting my gun to make a big noise. And all that implies. It could be some sort of illegal operation of some drugs or something. There's any number of reasons a gun can go off in the wilderness. It's most likely just someone who likes to shoot, but even that isn't awesome if you're a woman walking alone with your dogs in the wilderness.
No. I mean, I walk in the fields here in the fall, and I always have these bright orange, like I had to put away my fascinators with the feathers on them. Like, don't wear your sort of effie trinket fascinators out in the field because somebody will be like, oh, look, a pheasant, But I mean, we're all in orange, and the dog is in orange, and, I'm like, hi, I am a person, please don't shoot me. But I somehow, because I didn't grow up with guns in New Jersey, I don't have the confidence that people might not just be like drinking a beer and be like, oops, I shot her by mistake. So I have that same sort of like, but I think I know for a fact that you are much braver than I am. And where did you get the courage to be a guide for sheep hunters in Alaska? And I remember reading about this. Now sounded like the most miserable physical experience, and yet like something so vital. And so it was like the equivalent for me of climbing Everest, because you're the only woman I know who writes about these things. Like you're like the John Krakauer of like many adventures of like whitewater and Alaska. And like, where do you get the physical chutzpah to do this? I think it's so great.
I think two answers to that question. One is probably like a happy answer, and one's a not so happy answer.
I'll take both those answers. I'll take both yours.
The first answer is that, I just wanted to be like, I became a sheep hunting guide in Alaska because to me, nothing sounded better than spending 6 full weeks in the Alaskan wilderness. I love to be out in the wild still. I mean, one reason that Mike married me, because he doesn't give a shit about me being Pam Houston. One reason he married me is that I'll still sleep on the ground, and he couldn't find any women his age who would sleep on the ground, which is, that's a sort of a fun thing to say out loud, like he married me because like, not because I'm so special. He married me because I was willing to sleep on the ground, like not in a trailer and not on a cot and not even on one of those like 6-inch thick pads. Like I still like to sleep on the ground.
Like flat on the ground with no sleeping bag, no nothing.
No, I have a little pad, but
come on, Pam.
I'm 58 years old and it hurts, but I still like to travel really light in the wilderness. So it was about, being a river guide, being a hunting guide. That was all about literally wanting to spend day after day after day after day after day after day after day in the wilderness. And at that time in my life, I had to find a way to make a living in order to do that, so that's why guiding. And also because it's fun to show other people the wilderness, that's always been really fun for me. The bravery aspect, I think, is probably about an abusive childhood and wanting to recreate, life-threatening danger and then master it, which is, as we all know who've had therapy, psychology 101. I think I kept putting myself, because I didn't just go into the wilderness and hang out. Like I went into the wilderness where I had to boot ski down a glacier after dark, or I went into the wilderness and skied, out of bounds, chutes, or I went into the wilderness and I ran rivers at super high water. So, and I'm not that way anymore so much, but I mean, I have, we all have our ways of finding adrenaline rushes, but I think I was recreating the danger of my childhood, where my father was kind of always looking for some opportunity to hurt or kill me, and trying to be the master of that, and being like, I can run this river at flood stage and survive. That'll prove that I'm, I think I've been trying to keep my father from killing me all my life in one way or another, even though he's dead.
Yeah, just because the aggressor or the threat is dead doesn't mean that ever really goes away, right, in one form or another. So I think it's a blessing and a curse that writers have these very soft memories, and that like people's actions make a big imprint. And then you sort of like write around that. It was one of the things that I loved so much about your work and your collections of stories, in which you mentioned your dad, who did sound like an asshole. I mean, like a really tyrannical, terrifying person. But there was such a wonderful way you did this that let us know this, and lent a heart and a gravitas to the stories, which otherwise could have been merely thrilling adventure tales. So you provided this sort of psychological template for what readers might otherwise be wondering, like, why would you do this, right? And then you think, oh, but it also was not belabored. So he got just as much airtime, I felt, to make the psychological rationale for doing a lot of this stuff understandable, so we didn't have to think about it and could just enjoy what you were writing. And at the same time, he didn't get that much airtime, and I felt like that was really delicately and masterfully done.
Well, thanks. I appreciate you saying that. In Deep Creek, which is my first memoir, I mean, I've written a lot of personal essays, but Deep Creek is my first full-length memoir. And kind of the same thing happened. Like when I started writing it, I thought, this is only about the ranch. This is only about my life at the ranch. This book is a calendar. It's like putting up hay, lambs being born, wood being chopped. This is not about my shitty childhood. This is not about my stupid boyfriends. Like, this is me being the cowboy on my ranch, And then, we got a draft of it, and it was like, okay, but why is she so sad? Like, why does she need a ranch to heal her? So I ended up writing, in this different voice, this memoir voice about my dad and my mom. It's just early in the book. It's not a big percentage of the book, but it made the ranch make sense. The ranch didn't make sense without it. That's what my editor said, and she was right. And when I went on tour, everybody was like, I can't believe this happened to you, and Cowboys Are My Weakness is my favorite book. And I was like, okay, well, then you didn't read very carefully. But I mean,
they had missed it. They had missed that.
Or they thought it was fiction, or like, it was just really weird to me, as someone who is always writing in that gray area between fiction and nonfiction, that so many people were like, I can't believe your parents were like this. And I was like, God, I've been writing about this my whole life, yeah. But to be fair, those books were called fiction, so, but anyway, I was glad to hear you say that you felt it in Cowboys, because I certainly intended it to be there.
Oh, I thought it was there. It was very Sylvia Plath, Daddy, the big brute, was like, that footprint was everywhere, even though it was just a footprint. It wasn't like this, it wasn't like the thing you were really writing about. It just gave the psychological weight of the thing that you were writing about. And so it surprises me that people didn't see that. But the thing about writing fiction is people always think you're writing nonfiction. And when you write nonfiction, people always think that you're writing fiction. So you're kind of damned if you do all the things. And, I find myself explaining to people that I'm not the, 90-year-old German woman in my first book and things like that, but it's such a privilege just to have people believe in these things so fervently that they're not questioning or not seeing some of the mechanisms. So what, as somebody who wrote fiction and writes fiction, and is it fair to say you've sort of transitioned more to memoir and essay? Like, are you still writing fiction and memoir and essay? And, you know, what are some of the perks of writing nonfiction versus fiction? Like, what do you like best about each thing?
You know, I never wanted to write a memoir. You know, fiction is my first love, and it's what I'm trained as. I'm trained as a fiction writer. I went and got a, you know, 9/10 of a PhD in it. Um, I know how to write fiction, and I understand its mechanisms. And I've written a lot of nonfiction because that's what we've been asked to do over the last 20 years. And I feel pretty good about the personal essay. I feel pretty good about my fluency in it. But when I started to write the memoir, again, you know, under some pressure, not terrible pressure, but it's what the publisher wanted. And I thought, why not? They've let me do everything I've wanted all my life. Why can't I write this book for them? I really realized I didn't know how to write a memoir, you know, like I could write personal essay. Like to me, that transition was super easy, but the transition to the full length memoir, I really didn't understand its mechanisms the way I understand fiction. And what I finally figured out after like a couple of years of slamming my head into a wall, really, was that, you know, in fiction, the action is kind of horizontal. It pops, you know, if you're bored in fiction, you can just have a sexy Italian walk in the room or blow up a car, you know, you don't have to sit in your boredom. And I'm really afraid of being boring. Like, I think maybe sadly, that's my biggest fear. You know, that's the New Jersey girl. Like she's not so afraid of being cruel, but she's really afraid of being boring. And, and in memoir, like you don't have that option. I mean, I tried really hard not to deviate at all from what really happened in this memoir, just almost as an aesthetic exercise more than a moral one. But you just have to sit there and wait for it to mean something. And I found that excruciating. Like it was, you know, like if fiction is explosives, you know, memoir is like water running into a field and saturating, and then maybe the meaning will rise up out of it. But the waiting was awful for me. And I'm glad I did it because I teach memoir all the time. And now I know a little more about what I'm talking about. But, and I might do it again someday. But I'm really excited about getting back to fiction. You know, I love fiction. I love it. I understand it. You know, it's like the sister I get along with. And so I'm writing fiction now and really enjoying it. I'm also writing some political essays, you know, because I feel that that's really important right now. But no new memoirs immediately.
So if fiction is the sister you get along with, then is memoir like the weird cousin who you have to entertain for like a few weeks over the summer, but you've found some good things about, maybe?
Something like that, yeah.
Like that. I mean, I'm finding this such a master class in the differences of writing because I am a fiction person too and started out writing short stories, which are my first true love, I think. And I like them, I think, better than writing novels. They are like a tiny, simple equation that means everything. And there's something so neat about that hat trick. It's like putting all the scarves back in the hat or something, and they come out in a different way and they mean the whole world. But I'm working on a memoir, like revising a memoir, and I had never intended to do it and never wanted to do it. And I had a dog I loved, so I'm writing about him. But I'm still feeling my way into it, and the voice is a little different for me. I feel like it's a more careful form of writing in some sense. Like I feel more tightly controlled. And it occurred to me when I was revising a scene that I didn't have to write the scene exactly as it happened because, as you said, it could be really boring. And so I could I can snip out a few hours here and not make the reader sit in the waiting room with me, which in fiction would be a no-brainer. I mean, I would say to any student and to myself, like, that's the boring part, leave that out. Oh my gosh, I see them like running around behind you. Livy and Henry are like, wow, this whole talk is boring. Like, let's go outside and play in the creek. Anyway, but I'm glad to hear that you're getting back to writing fiction. Do you have an affinity more for the short story or the novel, do you think?
The short story, no question. I mean, to me, the short story is the perfect form. And and I adore it. You know, I, I have, I have managed to write 2 novels by putting a lot of pieces together, because I only really see work as pieces that combine to make bigger pieces, that combine to make bigger pieces. So even my stories, you know, when you put them together in a volume, they add up to a bigger piece. So that was how I was able to write a novel. But I don't really, like, I couldn't write a linear novel because I don't believe in linearity exactly, you know? So, but the other thing I was going to say about memoir, like, and I mean, this is back to this New Jersey thing. Memoir requires a certain level of sincerity, you know, and you know, and I'm an honest writer all the time. I am going digging for the truth. But in memoir, you have to be sincere, and I was afraid sincerity was boring, you know, which is like psychologically sort of maybe not great, but I had to get comfortable with my own sincerity. And
Yes, yeah. I'm like so excited. There's a difference between between honesty and sincerity and earnestness, and you don't want to tip over into being earnest. One of my other idols, my handful of literary idols, is watching our chat, Elizabeth Berg, and she also is a novelist who is writing memoir. And I've been sneakily asking everybody about memoir. I just realized, like, the last 4 Fridays, I'm like, what do you like about writing memoir, and how do you do it exactly? So I'm like getting this master class. But we had been talking about the difference of in the voice also, and just coming out and stating something honest about your life. And it is a different way of being honest than in fiction, where sometimes I feel like it's a freer thing in fiction because you're supposedly in disguise, so you can just say the thing that you're not ever supposed to say. And the thoughts of tone are a little bit about language, as opposed to about, like, am I coming off looking like an earnest douchebag kind of person? Speaking of Elizabeth, and I wanted to ask about the political essays also, because you know I like to talk politics, but Elizabeth wants to know, we both know, everybody knows you're a big traveler, like you get around, girl. And I was wondering too, before we started chatting, how is it for you not to travel right now? And is there a silver lining to not traveling, in addition to maybe exploring the mountains that are close to your house?
There are many silver linings to not traveling, though I miss it desperately. The silver linings to not traveling, one huge one, is that I have been, you know, really nervous over the last decade about my carbon footprint. You know, I didn't have children, so I sort of had that in my favor. I keep my house at 60 degrees because the wolfhounds prefer it that way, so I had that in my favor. But the flying I've done in my life, and I've done a lot of it, hasn't been great for the planet. And so I feel good about being still. You know, I feel good as an environmentalist about being still. The other thing is, like, the animals are so happy. Like, all our animals are happy. The sheep and the chickens, like, everybody's happy because we're here all the time, and it's not a house sitter, and it's not like me rushing out there before I jump in the car and drive 5 hours to the airport to get on a plane. You know, the animals are at peace. And when I feel like I'm going to die if I don't get to go out for sushi, or if I don't get to sit on a table, you know, at a table with all my writer friends in Portland, you know, drinking wine and talking art, I think, well, at least the animals are happy. You know? So that's, you know, I'm trying to embrace it, and I'm trying to think about how my life might be different after it. You know, if COVID ever ends, or if it ends before the next pandemic begins, I'm thinking how I might live differently, like, not absolutely differently, you know, but I don't have to get on every plane I'm asked to get on, you know, and so maybe I can change a little. The hardest thing about living here is being stuck here. I mean, it's beautiful, and I'm so lucky, and I look out at this beauty, and I get to hike, and I am so aware of my luck and privilege in that regard. There's no one here within 100 miles who thinks like me. You know, there's no one. I mean, it's a very, very conservative place. It's, you know, if I wear a mask to the post office, I get called a name. So I've just stopped going to the post office. I just don't get my mail anymore. You know, yeah, I feel a little surrounded by guns and people who don't wear masks. And that's hard because I forget, like I went to the first time I've been gone since early March, I went to Santa Fe last week and I just drove around. Like I went to the Whole Foods and I saw an elderly friend, but it's 4 hours from here. And I just went there. I thought, oh, I'm just going to drive the streets and like look for someone in a madras skirt, you know, or look for someone with dreadlocks. And I'm just going to be like, hey, hi, you know, hi, we believe the same thing. Nice to see you out of the window of my Prius. You know what I mean? Like, I like, I just, that's been the hardest thing about not traveling, is not interacting with people who are fighting for social justice and the power of art and, you know, that kind of thing.
I certainly feel that. I have the same sort of love of the land being here in Minnesota, where my great grandparents settled as pioneers, like close to the Laura Ingalls Wilder house. You know, I grew up on this myth that my mom fed me of the land, and I love the land. I worship the land, and demographically, and I think politically, I'm less out of water than I was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. But during the election, I was the only person who had a Hillary sign, and it kept getting torn up, and I felt very uncomfortable about that. Like my aunties, you know, my honorary aunties who I had grown up with, I knew were not voting the same way I was. And it means everything to me. Like I have been thinking, if you don't have country, you have nothing. Like people say, oh, you have family and therefore that's everything. It's not if your country is in shambles. Like you have your health. If your country is in shambles, you don't have your health either, as we're seeing so demonstrated, right? So like my country means everything to me. And so to be in a place where the land felt like an embrace, but I felt untrusting of the people is a really sad and awful thing to say, I felt. And so I'm sort of struggling with that being out here. And I feel you also, I know you're a passionate activist, and to not be, when I left Boston to come out here to get my puppy and then stayed for a while, I was like, I miss marching. Like I have a megaphone and a backup megaphone, you know, they're always charged. And so can you talk a little bit about also your bravery? Like if I had one adjective for you, it would be courageous. So can you talk about your bravery and your political activism online, and also just like living where you live? Are you afraid anybody's going to be like, there's that writer and we're going to shoot her, you know, like, but I mean, maybe that's paranoia, but what enables you to feel okay doing this both in the real world and online?
You know, I realized something and I had to write my way to it. I mean, I am afraid, you know, I am afraid that like if civil war breaks out, which I think we're on the verge of it, I don't necessarily mean it will happen, but we're being pushed that way. If civil war breaks out, I'm the one they'll come to get in my county. You know what I mean? I mean it. Like I really mean it.
I believe you. I have the same feelings. Yes.
You know, and it's partly because it's not that there aren't any other progressive thinkers here. There are, but they don't say anything. And you know what people around here say is, oh, it makes much more difference who we elect as school board president than who we elect as as president. Like that's the kind of thinking. So I am afraid, you know, I would not be a little surprised. I would not be surprised for 1 second if a little gaggle of camo wearing men came up my driveway. I really wouldn't. I don't think it's going to happen, but I would not be surprised if it did. But what I learned in writing, you know, when we all got locked down and the move toward fascism started to escalate, more and more rapidly. And I kept posting, you know, and I kept posting my thoughts and my things. And I would think, well, I should probably just shut up. Like I should probably just shut up and wait to see what happens. And then the next day I would post again. And I wrote this little book, and when I say little, I mean it's a physically small object that's coming out in October. And I wrote it with another environmental activist and feminist, Amy Irvine, who wrote a book called Trespass and a book called Desert Cabal. And we were paired by Orion to write letters to each other during the pandemic. And then once we started, we did this little short piece for Orion. And then once we started, we couldn't stop because we were like each other's lifeline, because she lives literally on the other side of that mountain I was describing, except it takes like 4 hours to get to her house. But she lives in a fairly conservative, not quite like this, but a fairly conservative area. So we were writing to each other and we were talking each other up, and we're like, this is the moment. This is the moment for women to step in and, and save the frickin' world. And, this is all related, this pandemic and climate change and, the abuse of our mother, the earth. And so we wrote these letters, and we would wind each other up so much. And they really were so invigorating. And what I wrote, the truth that I wrote myself to in those letters, and it's in one of the letters in a paragraph, is like, our choices as women right now under this administration, are either to be killed or to be silenced. And I guess I'd rather be killed, because I can't seem to make myself shut up.
I'm so anxious for you. And at the same time, I have to fan myself a little. I'm like, I don't want anything bad to happen to you. But I completely understand that, obviously, and relate to it. When back in the olden days, when Obama was president, and we had him running against Romney, which I was like, ooh, Romney wears man jeans, he's a bad Republican. So, that was what I was thinking then. But I remember my publisher saying, it might behoove you not to be quite so political on Facebook. And I said, I didn't become a writer to hide what I believe in. Like, the whole point of being a writer is that, at least for fiction, was a way of me putting on like a kabuki mask so that I could yell out what I believed from behind the mask. But I found also on Facebook that I had no inclination to be quiet. And the more people poked me and the more I got trolled, the louder I got. And I just take that as a compliment to be like, oh, good, I must be making a difference if I'm noisy. But I agree, this sort of Handmaid's Tale choice of you get to either be in Mayday or be on the wall. Like, I don't like pain, I don't like discomfort, but I also seem incapable of being quiet about things. And as somebody who writes about the Holocaust era, I don't think we should, I think silence is complicity. So that's
also, we're white. And so we are so much more safe than people who aren't. I teach, at the Institute of American Indian Arts. I have been involved, not since the pandemic because of where I live, but in the past with Black Lives Matter. It's, I can say I'm afraid the men are going to come up my driveway. And honestly, like, I would be the one here in my little tiny county here. I would be the one they would get. But so I am probably the least safe person in my county, but I'm still infinitely safer than the people who are putting their bodies on the line, for Black Lives Matter. And so really, if I can't suck it up, like, who am I to even complain about what's happening in the country? And I have a lot of complaints. So, I just, I've lived 58 years in this, improbable democracy, and I have benefited from it as a white person. I have fought my way, into a profession that didn't love women when I started. And I've been the recipient of so many good things. And if I can't fight for it now, and if I can't fight for the things that crush me, which are, the lies we tell to the Native people, the children in the cages, the mothers of Black boys who don't know whether they're going to come, like those things literally crush me. And if I can't fight for justice with my platform, my whatever mid-sized platform that I've created out of how generous my readers have been to me all these years of being a writer, then like, what was it for? What was it for? And literally, if those guys do come up my driveway, I'll think, well, I got some shots in, I got them in, I don't, this is it, like this is the 5-alarm fire. We're in it. I have no doubt of it. I'm not saying it can't get worse. I'm just saying, like, we're in it. This is the moment we either speak up or we don't. And I am not going to lie and say, I haven't thought 100 times. Just shut your mouth, Pam, and live through this. And then you'll be in a better position later to be an activist. But every time I think that, the other voice comes in and says, no, this is it. This is now. Do it now. This is that's why you built a platform. You built a platform to try to help people. Toni Morrison said, if you find yourself somewhere, it's your job to reach down and pull somebody else up. Mm-hmm. I think about that all the time as a teacher of young writers. But also, I have a platform, I have a ranch, I have a place from which to speak, and I'm going to try to reach down and help somebody else, because otherwise there's no reason for me to have gotten here.
Oh my God, there's nothing I can say that would follow that and be any better or more inspiring or more, it's like a bugle call, basically. Elizabeth, who should basically have just been on this call with us because she has many questions for you, but she had asked while you were talking, do you feel that writers have a moral obligation to call out the wrongs? And it sounds like for you personally, I mean, obviously you do have that obligation, or you feel that obligation very strongly. Do you feel like that's an across the board thing? Like everybody who has a platform, like use your platform. Do you encourage your young writers to do that?
Sure. I encourage anyone to use their platform to fight this regime, and to save lives. But I would not say that I feel that every writer should, speak out politically. I think everybody has to absolutely make that decision themselves. When Amy and I were writing these letters back and forth, like here we are, two white women who have places in the mountains, like on the one hand, we're ridiculous, right? Like, and we're like justice, from our mountain homes, our only homes, to be fair. But, we're like, this isn't the time for our voices. This is the time for Black voices. This is the time for Native voices. This isn't the time for our voices. And, but then she said, well, if I hadn't read Cowboys Are My Weakness, like I wouldn't have gotten to Terry Tempest Williams. And if I hadn't gotten to Terry Tempest Williams, I wouldn't have gotten to Leslie Marmon Silko. Like who knows what stories are going to set people on a path to awakening or awareness or to discovering their own voice, And so I think it's kind of an all hands on deck moment. And I think that, I say over and over again in my nonprofit and in my writing, and to my Native students at IA, like I'm an ally. I'm going to be an imperfect one. I'm going to be an imperfect ally because I'm white and racism is embedded in the very words I use to try to combat racism. And so I have to be willing to be told off. I have to be willing to say, you're doing it wrong. Stop that, white woman. And then I'll say, okay, and I'll lick my wounds and I'll come back again, But do I think everyone should be doing it? No, I would never say that. I think everyone has to look at themselves and say, I can do the most valuable work by X. And for some of them, that's going to be writing like a children's book, or for some of them, it's going to be telling the story of their abuse. A lot of the women I know, white women who are writing memoirs about their abusive histories, are saying, well, does my story even matter? When all these other abuses are going on that are so terrible. And well, yeah, because they're going to empower someone else to tell their story. So no, I don't think everyone has to, I'm for anybody getting political. And I do think we have language, we have a tool, in addition to a platform, we have a tool that we've honed, and we can move people and perhaps, drive people to action. But I would never say I think every artist should do it. No, every artist has to do whatever every artist has to do. Like that's kind of the point of art.
Okay. I'm like, wow, I literally am on the edge of my chair. I've been sort of like, I'm watching myself on Zoom, like sort of falling off my chair because I feel like so inspired and impassioned by this. I think one thing I find very comforting about what you just said is that if you are an artist making art right now and you're not finding the intersectionality of the art and politics, that who knows how your work may influence somebody else to express their own truth or their own story or their own fiction or their own project, so that all of our art can be stepping stones for other people in that way. And I love that idea that you don't have to speak directly to the moment necessarily to inspire other people. You can give. I mean, for me, as like, I've been talking to a bunch of women who I've done these interviews with who are in like the lonely young married people's club, where we all had these crappy starter marriages, you know, in our 20s, that we all wanted to be writers. It was like the thing, you know. And a lot of what I read then, which was not speaking directly to my experience, but like made me feel less alone in that circumstance, helped me hone my determination to do the thing that I'm doing now. So, you know, just keep throwing yourself out there. But I'm so grateful for your political posts and your political essays. I read you and Heather Cox Richardson every day. Like, I wake up in the morning, I read Heather, and then I read Pam, and then I get up and, you know, walk the dog. And it gives me fortitude. And I hope that, you know, that if God forbid anybody ever came up your driveway in chemo and you went down in flames, like, there are people who would pick up the microphone for you because you carry the microphone every day. And, you know, this is, I think, the thing we have going for us that is not sort of Nazi Germany like, is that we're a country that is founded upon speaking out and, again, about pushing back. So I also encourage people to do whatever they feel they can do. And thank you for inspiring us to do that. It's not easy when you get pushback, or when you have to live in the fear that somebody may come and burn your house down. Like, it's not comfy. So thank you for taking on that discomfort. Can you tell us a little bit about, and then I should let you go because I think I've kept you for like at least an hour already, but can you tell us about the collection that you're putting together with Amy, and when it's out? I think you said October, which is like ideal position, right? Ideal timing. Remind us what the name is, and tell us a little bit more about it so we can get our little mitts on it.
Sure. I mean, one thing I just want to say, thank you for saying all that. It feels good to hear that. Because, you know, of course, I get a lot of things saying like, we really like your work, but shut up about politics. Shut up and sing, right? In any case, I do think we're at a moment, and I just want to say this, like, which is not to say we don't need all men on deck too, but I think we might be in a moment where women are really about to step into their power. Like, I just feel it. Like, I feel it intuitively. And, you know, if you think about Sally Yates, et cetera, like, I'll just say the name Sally Yates, but put all the women, you know, the Prime Minister, Jacinda, I can't say her name, the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Like, there's so many women right now who are being like, okay, like, the men haven't done so great, and here we are, and the world's on fire. And maybe it's time to, like, you know, the Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, I'm not good with names, but all these women, like, I feel it. And then just my friends, you know, and my writer friends, my artist friends, I feel this rumbling of like women who are about to realize, you know, that we have more power in our pinkies than, you know, Mitch McConnell has in his whole body, just to name one person. So
excuse me. Okay, I'm back.
So,
I'm back now.
If we're in this moment where the world needs help, you know, like, this country needs help, the earth needs help, and we have all this untapped power because we've been gaslighted, or because we haven't been willing to step into it. And so that's what this book is. That's what this book with Amy is. It's about that. And it's just letters back and forth. And, you know, they're polished, obviously, and honed, but they were just literally the letters that we wrote to each other. It's called Airmail, letters of politics, pandemics, and place. And we finished it. We sent it to a small, all power women press in Utah. These women are doing great work with the environment. We were like, can we get this out before the election? They were like, you bet. You know, we were just writing it in May, and it's coming out in October. So it's the fastest book. We have a beautiful artist, and let me just look at her name.
I'm so excited. I'm like looking through my computer to see like everything in your study.
It's a beautiful female artist, made the cover. When we talk to each other, I'm a belted kingfisher and Amy's a Stellar's jay. And so we have these drawings of Amy and me as birds talking to each other across the mountains. And so it's coming in October, Airmail, Tory House Press, an all female project. And I can't wait till it's out.
Oh my God, we're so excited for this. I literally like falling through my screen thinking like, I want to see the cover, which I hear is posted on Facebook. One of your readers had asked during this conversation whether you were able to be creative during the pandemic, and obviously you have been, and we're so excited to see the fruits of that labor. Like, I'm going to go pre-order it as soon as I get off Zoom, and I'm sure everybody is. So one last question that is from me to you. What do you have to say to your many readers, admirers, Pam Houston lovers who are watching you right now? Of course, obviously, we'll do anything you tell us to do. So this is your moment. Be political, pick up the megaphone, make art.
I think we are, yes, here's I think, I think one of the things we're suffering from in this country in a big way is a collective lack of imagination. I think people, I think a lot of people can't imagine that there's 135,000 people dead to this disease, and they don't even try. So the thing I would say is, like, imagination is empathy. We have to be able to imagine ourselves into each other's lives. And a lot of that is like reading about lives that aren't your own, just for one thing. But the act of imagining what it's like to die alone in a hospital, and like, why can't you wear your mask at the freaking grocery store? Like, can you are so unable to imagine yourself into the body of an 85-year-old woman who has to die without her children around her, that you won't put a mask on. Like, we have to be able to imagine what it's like, for a Black woman to see her son go to school in the morning, in a neighborhood where there might be white guys driving around, who want to kill him. We have to imagine what it's like for, the Bears Ears National Monument, which all of these tribal elders negotiated and, made, they preserve this land that is so sacred to them, and they just have it taken away because Trump's embarrassed because Obama did it, like, because of Trump's insecurity, like, we're all dying from the insecurity of Trump and men like him. So let's stop dying, and let's step into our own power, and let's imagine ourselves into each other's lives, because that's how we're going to make it better.
I love that. Thank you so much. Again, like, I just am wrapped. Thank you. And I, again, can never say anything that is better than that. Imagination is empathy, and we all have to be empathic. Thank you. And you're getting quite a bath there, I have to point out. So those of you who know Pam know that she has this great dog love. Can you turn your camera again so that we can see Livy as well as Henry?
Livy now.
Parting farewell shot.
Livy Lou. There she is.
Oh. She's like, lady, I am having a Z. Like, please do not bother me while I'm having my nap on the couch, on the nice comfy couch. Oh my gosh, what a treat. Thank you so much for spending time with us and inspiring us and filling us full of passion and imagination, and for your stories and for the letters between you and Amy, which we'll look for in October. And we'll keep watching and reading, so keep posting, please, and be safe.
Thank you so much. It's been so nice to get to know you a little bit, Jenna.
Thank you.